We want to avoid this type of position as well. When we're pushing away from a table, we want to think about lifting everything up as a unit, not just hitching up at one particular area. My name is Greg Chaplin. I'm a physical therapist and strength conditioning specialist. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the bird dog. I'm going to talk about the 3 most common mistakes that I see when people do this exercise, and then we're going to go through a progression of exercises that you can use to make your bird dog more effective. Now, before we get into today's video, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you'll know when I upload a new video. And if you like this video, make sure you like it. Leave me any questions below in the comments. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, what mistakes do we typically see with this exercise? The most common mistakes that we're going to see with this exercise involve the position of the pelvis, and then this is somewhat going to affect the position of the rib cage as well. So the most commonly seen issues with this are either dipping the pelvis too far forward, which causes the spine to come into a little bit more of an arched position, or we're tipping the pelvis too far backwards, causing the spine to come into a relatively flexed position. And so there is a sweet spot where we're able to keep this in a relationship that allows us to get motions within the pelvis that are necessary for that restoration of hip motion. If we are dumped too far forward or too far back, we increase the likelihood that we're going to be losing these motions within the pelvis, and we increase the likelihood of using superficial musculature that is ultimately going to limit our motion at the extremities. The second most common mistake that we see is going to also involve the pelvis. So once we have that front to back, what we'll also see is when we're on one leg and we go to extend the other leg, a lot of times we get this lifting up and we start turning away from this downside. This is going to rob us of the benefit of getting that internal rotation. So when we lift this back leg, we want to keep this pelvis level. And when we do our setup, if we're in this sort of a position where one's higher than the other, we want to make sure we're able to level that out so that the support side ends up having to come into that little bit of internal rotation. And the last most common mistake we're going to see is up here in the rib cage. So a lot of times when people are pushing into that all fours position, they'll kind of hitch up here in the lower part of the spine, and what's happening underneath is usually that the sternum is getting pulled up like this as well. We're getting too much activation of those rectus abdominal muscles, which is going to rob us a little bit of the benefit of having the outer abdominals. That's also going to push back on the front of the pubic bone, and that's going to rob us of the anterior expansion that we need to get that hip internal rotation, and then also the shoulder internal rotation that we're looking for. So we want to avoid this type of position as well. When we're pushing away from a table, we want to think about lifting everything up as a unit, not just hitching up at one particular area. So our first progression in starting to look at how to set up the bird dog is going to involve our heels on the wall, which is going to provide us an element of reference. If you're not familiar with this concept, go ahead and check out my video on feet on walls and reference centers. We're going to push those heels back into the wall as we bring the hands below the shoulders, knees below the hips. We're then going to first just let that low back and pelvis kind of relax and try not to hold it in any particular position. Then as we push the heels into the wall, we're going to try to feel our sit bones almost pulling down towards the back of our knees here. And so the way that we can check to make sure that we're getting this through more of the muscle of the hip initially, rather than those center abdominal muscles, is we can take a hand here and we can put it on the very lower part of the sternum. So we're going to feel a little pointy bone there. And as we bring that hip into a very subtle tucked under position, we shouldn't feel any movement in the sternum at all, okay? If you do this and it turns into this kind of thing and you feel that sternum get pulled up, you're getting a little bit too much center abdominals. So once again, we're going to push the heels into the wall. We're going to just tuck very subtly, imagining pulling down with the back pockets. We're going to check that sternum to make sure that we're not getting compressed up. Then from here, we're going to reach into the table and we're going to think about lifting the rib cage up as a unit. Okay, so this is not hitching up through the middle part of the back at that lower rib cage level. This is lifting everything as a unit. From here, we can do some breaths in and out through the through the nose and out through the mouth. And so we're going to breathe in, exhale. As we exhale, we should feel that the ribs move together and we get a little bit of engagement of those outer abdominals. Now, if you're not feeling that, what you can do is you can shift your weight to one side, take your breath in, exhale, but lift the opposite hand, and you feel the abdominals on the down side. From here, we can then progress this activity by getting into like a bear crawl static hold. You'll actually push the heels into the wall, you'll lift the knees up, and then you'll do your breaths from there. In through the nose, out through the mouth, and hopefully you can feel the outer abdominals there and the center abdominals don't become the focal point. Now to progress this more towards the bird dog, we're going to go away from the wall. We're going to get one point of reference for our heel. And in this position is when we're going to get to work on making sure we level the pelvis. So you could set up a video to make sure that you're doing this. The best angle would probably be behind you. But again, what we're looking for is that this upside hip doesn't go way above this downside. So we're going to make sure the upside hip comes down. We might even feel a little bit of stretch in the butt on this side. And then we're going to go through our same checklist that we did earlier. So we're going to do a very subtle tuck with the tailbone coming under. That shouldn't affect the sternum. And then from this position, we can breathe in through the nose, exhale out through the mouth as we push the foot into the wall. Should feel a little bit of glute on that upside hip and probably a little bit of stretch in the glute on the downside hip. Now from here, we can then do a reach as well to get more towards that final bird dog. So we're going to take our breath in as we reach. We're going to exhale as we push into the wall and return this hand. Inhale, reach. Exhale as we push into the wall and return the hand. And once we feel like we have pretty good control with all those moving pieces, we can then finally go to the bird dog itself, inhaling as we reach, exhaling as we return. Inhale, reach, exhale as we return. So there you have it. There's your progression to get into the bird dog correctly. Remember, we're trying to get that lower spine and pelvis in the right position, trying to avoid too much use of those center abdominals, making sure to lift that rib cage as a unit, not hitching at one spot, and then we're going to keep that pelvis level so that we actually get the internal rotation in the hip that we want. Thanks a lot for watching today's video. If you have any questions, drop them below in the comments. If you haven't already, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you'll know when I upload a new video. And until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.